Hey guys, tonight we step straight into a world where winter is not just a season but a test of endurance, a long trial stretching across months where every sunrise feels like a small victory. Picture this. Your breath hangs in the air, a soft white cloud that vanishes into the still darkness of early morning. The sky is a slate of frozen grey, and your bare toes curl against the dirt floor of a cottage that never seems to stay warm. You wrap yourself tighter in a rough woolen blanket, stitched clumsily but lovingly by your grandmother, and you wonder, can you make it through another day like this? I'll be honest with you, you probably wouldn't survive this, not with your heated mattress pad and late-night snack drawer. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love it if you'd comment your location and the local time down below. It's always fascinating to see where and when people are listening in. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Snow crusts the ground outside, and the village is still. You push open a crooked wooden door, the iron hinges groaning like tired bones, and the first breath of icy air slices across your cheeks. Out in the clearing, the cottages of your neighbours huddle close together, low thatched roofs buried under drifts. Smoke snakes upward from chimneys, though in weak, reluctant wisps. Fuel is scarce, and each log tossed into the hearth feels like a treasure lost. The smell of charred pine mixes with the sour tang of yesterday's cabbage soup clinging to your clothes. You trudge toward the village well, a wooden bucket banging against your knee. The rope has frozen stiff overnight, and your fingers ache as you work the pulley, knuckles whitening with each turn. The water, when it finally splashes into the bucket, is tinged with ice and reflects your hollow-eyed face. You sip quickly, because if you wait, the bucket will crust over before you can bring it home. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers actually dreaded winter more for hunger or for thirst, since frozen water sources meant even the basics of survival were never guaranteed. Your stomach growls. Breakfast isn't eggs and toast. It's a thin porridge ladled from the pot that simmered all night, oats stretched with water, perhaps flavoured with a scrap of onion. If you're lucky, someone traded a lump of honeycomb at the last market day, and a drizzle of sweetness transforms the otherwise bland sludge into a fleeting luxury. Your children scoop theirs with wooden spoons, eyes half-lidded, the steam fogging the air. Jokingly, you mutter, "Michelin star dining, right here," though the only star overhead is hidden behind storm clouds. As you walk the muddy lane, boots slipping on patches of ice, you glance at the sky. The pale winter sun is already climbing, but it offers little warmth. The roofs drip faintly where yesterday's fire thawed the snow just enough to melt. A neighbour, wrapped in a saffron-dyed cloak faded from age, waves weakly. He's carrying firewood too, 2 small logs strapped to his back. It's not enough, not really. Everyone knows the forest is thinning near the village edge. Legends whisper that once wolves ruled there, and maybe they still do. A single howl at night is enough to stiffen your spine and remind you that you are not the only one hungry. Inside the cottages, the air is stifling, but not in the cosy way you might imagine. The hearth smoulders, filling the room with smoke. Chimneys are a privilege, not a guarantee. And so soot coats the beams above, flakes falling into soup pots like uninvited seasoning. Your lungs feel heavy, your eyes sting, and yet you huddle closer anyway. Fire means life. Historians still argue whether peasants deliberately welcomed the choking smoke because it preserved the timbers of their homes, killing pests in the rafters, or whether it was simply an unavoidable misery. Either way, you cough, wipe your nose on your sleeve, and press on. You glance at your children, one carving a stick into a toy sword, the other tracing shapes in the dirt floor. Their laughter briefly softens the edges of the hunger gnawing at you. It's strange how play can survive even in hardship. One child asks, "Will spring come soon?" You smile and nod, though your eyes betray you. Spring feels like a distant myth, a fairy tale told by the wind that whips through the gaps in your roof. There's a superstition you recall. If a candle flame burns steady through a storm, it means the village will see a short winter. You light a stub of tallow candle and watch it flicker. The flame dances wildly, sputtering in the draught. You mutter something between a curse and a prayer. Superstitions cling to you like the wool cloak you never remove. They offer comfort, or maybe just the illusion of control. Your belly knots again, and you open the food chest. Inside, a few wizened turnips, half a loaf of black rye bread hardened like stone, and a small pouch of dried beans. You ration carefully because tomorrow may bring less. You remember stories of neighbours during the famine years mixing bark and moss into bread dough. You pray you'll never have to taste that bitter concoction yourself. The day stretches slowly. Tasks blur into one another, chopping wood, mending nets, patching clothes with scraps so frayed they barely hold. Evenings are the hardest when the cold presses in and silence deepens. You huddle under furs, listening to the whistle of the wind. Sometimes it sounds like voices or laughter or cries. The mind plays tricks in the darkness. You chuckle, whispering to yourself, "Great, haunted by the wind, just what I needed." A neighbour knocks. He carries a sack of barley and proposes a trade, a bundle of firewood for 2 scoops of grain. You hesitate because both are priceless. Still, community is survival. You agree, and later, when his wife falls ill, you'll offer herbs in return. Bonds are not luxuries, they're the thread that ties life together in this brittle season. Night falls quickly, as if the sun itself flees the frost. You lie beside your family on straw pallets, the animals close for warmth. A cow snorts in the dark, a chicken rustles feathers. It's oddly comforting, this mingling of human and beast. You close your eyes, your last thought not of comfort but calculation. How many logs remain? How many meals left? How many nights you can endure? The morning has barely broken, yet you are already dragging a bundle of logs toward the hearth, boots crunching on the frosted earth floor. The cottage breathes out a cloud of smoke from the crooked chimney, though it looks more like a sigh than a triumphant blaze. You know the truth. Firewood is the most precious thing in winter, and it slips through your fingers faster than grain or salt. You kneel before the hearthstone, iron fire tongs clutched in your red, raw hands, and prod the faint embers with desperate precision. If the coals die, you'll have to spend hours rubbing flint and steel, coaxing life from stubborn sparks. Not everyone can manage that trick in the bitter cold. Some households are forced to beg a glowing ember from neighbours, balancing it in clay pots, praying the wind doesn't snuff it out along the way. You tug at the damp logs, grumbling under your breath as they hiss and spit. They were cut hastily in autumn, not seasoned enough, and now the wet wood steams, choking the room with clouds that sting your eyes. You cough hard, and the child beside you giggles at the way your face reddens. "Better than perfume," you mutter, waving smoke away with a wooden spoon. The joke earns a weak smile from your spouse, who is kneading what little dough remains on a plank balanced across her knees. Humour in the haze keeps spirits from collapsing entirely. The smell of burning pine mingles with old cabbage and boiled onions. Your throat tastes of soot. The rafters overhead, blackened by years of smoke, drip resin and tar like tears. Some historians still argue whether peasants tolerated smoky hearths on purpose because the fumes deterred insects and preserved wooden beams, or whether that's just a neat excuse for the misery. You shrug off the debate. Either way, you're coughing your lungs out, so it hardly feels like a clever trick. Fire is more than warmth, it's a centerpiece of survival. Every story, every whispered rumour, every lullaby circles back to the hearth. You notice the walls of your cottage are streaked with grey from years of smoke, turning once pale plaster into something like shadowed parchment. In winter, the hearth isn't just a fireplace, it's your calendar. The rhythm of your day begins and ends with how well the flames behave. Too small and you shiver. too hot and you burn through precious logs before sunset. It's a tightrope of sparks and ash. There is a ritual to the tending of flame. You blow gently at the embers, coaxing orange glows into sudden life. Sparks leap like mischievous spirits catching at the kindling. Soon a fragile flame shivers upward. You shield it with your hands, murmuring half a prayer, half a pep talk, because when you talk to the fire, it almost seems to listen. Some neighbors swear the flame has a soul, a temper you must not offend. One woman down the lane insists she saw a sprite darting within the coals, punishing her when she threw in damp straw. You roll your eyes at her story, though a tiny part of you avoids straw all the same. With the hearth coaxed to life, the day begins. Your family clusters around, palms open, cheeks flushing pink as the heat seeps into them. For a moment you feel almost safe, as though the walls are sturdier than they truly are. Beyond the timber, winter still waits, sharp and merciless. But here, just here, you have built a pocket of defiance. You lean back, listening to the crackle, watching smoke curl lazily toward the hole in the roof. If you squint, you can almost imagine you are wealthy, sitting before some grand noble's fireplace, lined with stone and tapestries, instead of mud-plastered walls and straw. Almost. Fuel is the constant worry. Every log you burn tonight is one less for tomorrow. Some families scavenge fallen branches after storms, trudging miles with wicker baskets biting into their shoulders. Others strip hedges, cut down fruit trees that once promised spring blossoms. You've heard of desperate winters when villagers even dismantled their own fences and roofs for firewood, trading shelter for heat. That's not you, not yet anyway. Still, the thought gnaws at you each time the axe bites another log. Historians still argue whether villages organized communal woodland management as early as the 13th century, or whether each family scavenged alone, risking disputes and bloodshed. In your world, the rules feel simple enough. Whoever can carry it keeps it. But lurking behind that simplicity is the ever-present threat of lords and foresters. A noble's decree might forbid cutting certain trees, and punishment can be severe. You remember one neighbor fined for gathering kindling in the lord's forest. He swore he was just picking twigs, but coin was demanded anyway. Justice is as cold as the season. You think about the forests while staring into the fire. Beyond the village, the woods are hushed, muffled by snow. Branches bow low, heavy with frost. Somewhere an owl calls, somewhere else wolves patrol. The forest is both provider and predator. Each log, now in your hearth, once lived out there, shaded by the canopy, a silent witness to centuries. Now it burns in your cottage, crackling away in minutes. The irony isn't lost on you. You chuckle dryly. Nature's gift shop, everything must go. Your children toss in small sticks, laughing at the sparks. Their eyes widen at each flare, treating fire as both toy and teacher. You catch yourself smiling, though you quickly scold them for wasting kindling. Still the playfulness lingers, easing the heavy air. In truth, these moments of levity are what keep despair at bay. As the day lengthens, smoke thickens until the air seems chewable. You open the door briefly, letting in a blast of winter air that bites harder than the smoke suffocates. Your spouse glares. You'll let the warmth out, but you argue, better lungs than frozen toes. The quarrel dies quickly, replaced by weary laughter. Sarcasm keeps marriage intact, even when kindling does not. When evening arrives, the glow of the fire paints the walls gold. Shadows leap like dancers. You sit cross-legged, poking the logs again, watching the flames shift from yellow to blue at their base. You think about how fragile this all is. A simple gust of wind, a forgotten spark, and the cottage might burn down or go dark entirely. Fire is survival, but fire is also risk. You've heard tales of whole villages lost to a single careless ember, and yet without it you would not last a single night. That paradox rests heavy in your mind as you settle down on the straw pallet once more. Your children nestle close, eyes heavy, soot streaking their cheeks like war paint. The hearth still glows faintly, crackling a lullaby. You whisper, "Behave yourself, little fire," before closing your eyes. Outside, snow drifts silently against the door. The night has passed in fits of coughing and restless dreams, and when you stir awake, you realize the room feels more crowded than ever. Your cottage walls, low and mud-plastered, seem to squeeze inward with each icy gust that slips through cracks. This is the heart of winter survival, huddling together, human and beast alike, in the hope that shared warmth outweighs shared discomfort. You rise, stretching stiff joints, and your elbow bumps the flank of a cow lying just a few feet away. She groans softly, steam curling from her nostrils, and you mutter, "Good morning, roommate," with the kind of sarcasm only exhaustion can fuel. Livestock inside the home may sound bizarre to modern ears, but here it is practical genius. The animals generate heat, and every extra degree keeps frost from crawling deeper into your bones. The floor is strewn with straw that crunches under your feet, thick with the mingled smells of hay, manure, and damp wool. The odor is heavy, but you have grown used to it. It smells like life refusing to quit. Historians still argue whether families truly welcomed the animals into their cottages out of necessity alone, or whether it also reflected the blurred boundary between human and animal existence in the medieval imagination. You don't debate the matter, you just breathe easier with a living furnace snorting at your side. You glance around the room. Your children are curled under a patchwork of blankets, noses barely peeking out, breaths rising like small clouds. Your spouse is already awake, rubbing hands together briskly before reaching for the embers in the hearth. The cow shifts, hooves scraping the floor, while the chickens, perched precariously in the corner, flutter their wings in sleepy protest. You mutter a joke. At least the rooster doesn't need an alarm clock app, earning a faint smile from your half-asleep daughter. You stoke the fire, adding another stick, though each piece feels like gold slipping through your hands. The warmth spreads slowly, licking at the chill that clings to the walls. Everyone inches closer, drawn like moths to the fragile glow. The children tuck their toes against the cow's side, and she endures with patient resignation. You envy her thick hide, wondering if perhaps you should sprout fur yourself. "New winter fashion trend," you whisper. "Who wore it best, the cow or me?" The huddle of bodies is more than comfort, it is survival. At night, you and your spouse sleep shoulder to shoulder, your children pressed tightly against you, your smallest child resting partly across your chest. Your breath mingles, your heartbeat sinking to theirs, and though space is tight, you feel a strange sense of safety in the closeness. The warmth of another person or another beast is the cheapest and most reliable form of heating technology you possess. Historians still debate whether such nightly closeness created stronger familial bonds than in later centuries when wealthier homes allowed for separate rooms. But here, in this moment, the idea of separate rooms seems laughable. Why would anyone choose to freeze alone? As daylight brightens, you push open the cottage door and peek outside. The entire village appears to breathe in unison. From house to house, families crowd into doorways, faces pale, eyes rimmed with fatigue. Children cling to parents, wrapped in indigo and russet cloaks. Even dogs are pressed against human legs for warmth. The collective image is striking. One community stitched together by necessity, each household echoing the same huddle you feel inside your own walls. Yet closeness brings its troubles. Space is scarce, tempers flare. You recall last night when your eldest kicked in her sleep, catching you squarely in the ribs. You swore softly, earning a sharp glare from your spouse. Later, the cow's tail whipped across your face as she shifted, and you nearly toppled into the fire. In daylight, you laugh about it. We're a circus troupe just missing the tent. But in the moment, exhaustion makes you growl. there are other quirks too. In the cramped air, secrets don't last. You overhear every mutter, every grumble, every whispered dream. Children tattle instantly. He snored louder than the bellows. She stole the blanket. Privacy is as extinct as the butterflies you last saw in autumn. Yet oddly, this enforced transparency binds you all together. There is no space for pretense. Your lives overlap like woven threads, fragile but inseparable. As the day crawls forward, you tend to chores side by side. Your spouse mends clothing while your daughter combs the cow's coat, pulling burrs from her fur. Your son checks the chickens, collecting 2 small eggs that gleam like treasures in his palm. He beams proudly, and you ruffle his hair, declaring, "A feast fit for kings." Everyone chuckles, though you know those eggs will be divided carefully, each mouth receiving only a taste. You prepare a midday meal, thin broth again, stretched with cabbage leaves and a crust of bread softened in the liquid. Everyone crouches close, bowls cradled in hands, slurping slowly to trick the stomach into thinking there is more than there is. The cow watches with glossy eyes, chewing her cud, a silent witness to your rituals. You tap her nose gently, joking, "Don't worry, you're next in line for stew." Your children gasp in horror, then laugh when they realize you're teasing. Still, you avoid meeting the cow's gaze for a moment, just in case she understands more than you think. In the evenings, the huddle grows denser. The cold outside is merciless, and so you all press closer. You shift positions often, sharing the warmest spots, passing the children from one lap to another. When one of you coughs, the whole group stirs, adjusting, soothing. Your family is less a collection of individuals and more a single body, rising and falling with each shared breath. Stories pass the time. You tell your children a tale about a knight who faced a dragon of ice, his sword melting with each strike. Your daughter interrupts. Did he win? You pause, then grin. Of course. He married a cow for her fur coat. Laughter fills the smoky air, echoing against the rafters. Humour again is your shield against despair, a spark no frost can snuff out. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants found comfort in storytelling as a communal defence against hardship, or whether tales were just idle chatter. But sitting here, laughter mingling with the cow's low moo, you know the truth. It is both. Stories are warmth when firewood runs low, a feast when the pot is empty, a blanket when the wind howls. Night falls once more, the shadows stretching long, and you settle into your place among the huddled bodies. The straw rustles, the fire crackles, and outside the snow whispers against the door. You close your eyes, surrounded by family, animals, and the stubborn insistence of life clinging to every breath. You whisper, "One more night," and let the warmth of togetherness carry you through. Your stomach growls before the sun has even lifted its weary head, and you know today is one of those dreaded days the villagers call the hungry gap. The hearth still flickers faintly from last night's coals, but even the fire seems reluctant, as if it too is running out of strength. You shuffle to the wooden chest where you keep your food stores, lift the lid, and wince at the sight. The barrels are lighter, the baskets nearly bare. The once plentiful sacks of grain sag inward like collapsed lungs. Every corner whispers the same truth. You are running out. Breakfast is a meagre thing, more ceremony than sustenance. A crust of rye bread, hardened to the point of cracking, is dipped into thin broth to soften it. Each family member receives a piece no larger than a hand, and you make a game of it for the children. Who can chew longest without swallowing? The laughter it provokes is thin but real, and for a moment the gnawing emptiness is dulled. You catch your spouse's eye and see the same fear you feel, hidden under a smile. Sarcasm slips out of you like instinct. Banquet fit for an emperor. Don't forget to leave room for dessert. Dessert, of course, is the air itself. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly endured extended starvation every winter, or if chronic malnutrition was so normalized it blurred into daily life. Standing in your cold cottage, scraping crumbs from the bottom of a wooden bowl, you don't need a debate. You know what hunger feels like, how it sharpens every smell, how it makes your body betray you with grumbles and cramps, how it turns your dreams into visions of roasted meats and steaming pies. You look at your children and notice the thinness of their faces, the way their eyes are a little too large now. They chew carefully, obediently, savouring each bite as though it might vanish if rushed. You fight the urge to slip them your portion because you know weakness in yourself endangers them all. Sacrifice must be measured, rationed like the food itself. Too much generosity can kill as quickly as greed. After the morning's meagre meal, you set about the grim task of stretching what little remains. A barrel of dried peas is tipped, and only a few roll out, clattering on the floor like mocking dice. You gather them carefully, each pea precious, each one worth the labour of a day. A turnip, shriveled and soft at one end, is cut into quarters, the bad parts sliced away and tossed to the chickens, who peck gratefully. You mutter, "Even the chickens eat better," and your son laughs, though you weren't joking. By midday, the hunger sharpens into irritation. Small quarrels spark. Who took more soup? Who chewed too loudly? Who left crumbs on the floor? You scold your children gently, then more harshly when they persist. Hunger erodes patience as surely as frost erodes stone. You catch yourself snapping, then pull them close, murmuring an apology. It is not their fault. It is winter's fault, relentless and cold, pressing every soul into desperation. Your neighbours suffer too. You hear voices outside, low and tense, arguing over a rabbit caught in a snare. One insists it is his, the other swears he set the trap. In the end, they divide the animal, though both glare at each other with the kind of bitterness that lingers longer than winter. You shake your head, thinking, starvation makes liars of us all. In the corner of your cottage, you keep a pouch of beans mixed with gravel, an old trick for tricking the eye. When you look at it from afar, it seems fuller, less pitiful. You sometimes pour it out, sift it with your hands, then pour it back, pretending there's more than there is. It soothes the nerves, even if it doesn't fill the belly. Some villagers claim that simply counting food can ease hunger. Others say it's madness. Historians still argue whether rituals like these were coping mechanisms or genuine attempts at magic. You don't argue, you just keep counting because it helps. Evening comes and the stew pot bubbles with little more than water and herbs. You drop in one dried carrot, the last of its kind, and stir slowly. The broth turns faintly golden, and the smell brings everyone closer, noses hovering above the steam. You ladle it out with care, thin liquid sloshing into bowls. The taste is nearly nothing, but the warmth soothes, and for a moment you can close your eyes and imagine it is richer than it is. 5-star cuisine, you mutter, and your spouse chuckles despite herself. In darker corners of the village, hunger drives crueler measures. You've heard whispers, families thinning their mouths by sending children to distant relatives, hoping someone else can spare food. Others barter precious heirlooms for sacks of grain, a grandmother's silver cross traded for a single meal. You remember a tale of last year's famine, when bark was ground into flour, moss into soup. The memory makes your stomach twist, not from hunger, but from dread. Night deepens, and you lie on the straw pallet, your belly rumbling. Your daughter whispers that she dreamed of roasted goose, golden skin crackling. Your son murmurs about pies filled with apples and honey. You close your eyes and instead of rebuking their fantasies, you join them. And I dreamed of a feast with bread too. Allah than me and butter dripping like rivers. The children giggle, and for a moment the hunger recedes beneath laughter. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly dreamed of food as often as records suggest, or whether it was an invention of later storytellers. But tonight, as your family drifts into uneasy sleep, bellies empty, hearts heavy, you know for certain, dreams are the only place where feasts never run out. Your final thought before sleep is practical, not poetic. You calculate how many peas are left, how many days before they run dry, how many neighbors you might trade with, how many prayers you'll need to whisper. Survival isn't about tomorrow's feast. It's about clawing your way through tonight's hunger. And so, you turn on your side, pull the blanket tight, and mutter a final sarcastic lullaby. Bon appetit, air soup again. The morning begins with a sound you know well, the grinding rasp of a hand mill. It is the heartbeat of survival here, the slow, circular song of stone against stone. You crouch beside the mill, a round device no bigger than a stool, its upper stone turning beneath your hands. The effort makes your arms ache, and a fine powder of flour coats your fingers like pale dust. Grain, simple and unremarkable to some, is your lifeline, and today you treat every kernel like treasure. The sacks of rye and barley sit behind you, sagging but not yet empty. They are guarded as fiercely as gold. You count them again, though you already know the number, whispering 1 sack, half sack, quarter sack, like a ritual chant. Historians still argue whether villagers stored their grain mostly in communal barns or jealously in private chests, but in your cottage, secrecy rules. You've hidden some beneath straw, some in clay jars near the hearth. You know hunger can tempt even neighbors to theft, and trust has its limits when children cry out in the night. As the millstone turns, the rhythm steadies your thoughts. The grain cracks, breaks, and softens into coarse flour. It isn't like the white flour the wealthy enjoy. Theirs is sifted fine, soft as silk. Yours is dark, speckled with husks, the kind of bread that grits between your teeth. Still, it is bread, and bread means life. You mutter with sarcastic cheer, "Who needs pastries when you've got crunchy bread that doubles as a whetstone for your teeth?" Your spouse chuckles wearily, though the joke is as old as the bread itself. By mid-morning, the flour is ready. You knead it with water and a pinch of salt, nothing more. If you are lucky, you can stretch it with dried peas ground into powder or with oat husks swept from the mill. The dough resists, heavy and rough, but you push it into shape, your palms sore from the effort. You remember the stories of bread riots in towns where poor folk demanded relief from lords and monasteries. Out here in the village there is no riot, only quiet endurance, the sound of dough slapped against boards, the scent of yeastless loaves hardening in the air. You bake the bread on a flat iron plate set over the fire, or sometimes in a clay oven if the weather allows. The loaves emerge dark, heavy, their crusts cracked like the ground outside. You slice one, steam rising faintly, and the smell alone feels like a blessing. Everyone gathers quickly, eyes bright, hands reaching. Even the cow in the corner raises her head, sniffing curiously. You pass out slices, each piece thin, each bite savoured. Your youngest chews slowly, pretending to be a noble-tasting delicacies. "Exquisite," he says, exaggerating, and laughter fills the smoky air. Bread binds you not only to your family, but to the rhythms of the village. Once a week, families take turns baking in the communal oven near the church. There the air is thick with flour and gossip, the heat so fierce you can feel it before you round the corner. Women in indigo and russet aprons carry wicker baskets lined with cloth, balancing lumps of dough shaped at home. They mark each loaf with a family symbol, an X, a cross, a swirl, so they can reclaim their rightful share. You recall the last time you baked there, chatting with neighbours as smoke curled into the sky, trading news of who had food left, who had none. The oven is not just a furnace, it is a forge of community. Still, bread can be dangerous. You remember last year when mold crept into a sack of rye, people grew sick, their skin burning with strange rashes, their minds slipping into fevered visions. Some cried that demons had entered the grain, others swore it was punishment from God. Historians still argue whether outbreaks of ergot poisoning truly shaped medieval fears of witchcraft. But you know firsthand how terrifying it is to watch neighbours stumble, raving, clutching their bellies. Since then, you have sniffed every sack of rye with suspicion, muttering prayers and curses alike. The afternoon stretches, and hunger gnaws again. You slice another piece of bread, smaller this time, and chew slowly. The crust scrapes your gums, the interior dense and chewy. It is not indulgent, not even pleasant, but it fills the emptiness just enough. Your spouse suggests saving more for tomorrow. You nod, though part of you wants to snatch another slice. Restraint is harder than hunger. It is hunger sharpened by will. Later, you trade with a neighbour, a small bundle of firewood for a handful of barley. The grain rattles in your palm like coins, and you feel richer than a merchant in silk. Your neighbour grins wryly, saying, "Barley soup tonight, better than snow soup." You laugh, though the joke stings. Snow soup is no myth. It is water thickened with melted snow and flavoured with whatever herb might be scraped from the rafters. You pray it won't come to that this winter. At dusk you bake again. This time you add a few onions, chopped fine, to flavour the bread. The scent fills the room, sharp and sweet, and the children's eyes widen. They sing little songs while they wait, banging wooden spoons against the table like drummers at a feast. You roll your eyes playfully. Don't summon the nobles or they'll demand a share. The bread emerges crisp, fragrant, the onions softened into sweetness. Say, for a brief moment, the cottage feels like a banquet hall. But even as you chew, you cannot ignore the truth. The grain is finite. Each loaf shortens the line between now and hunger. You calculate silently, tallying the sacks, the days, the mouths. Historians still argue whether peasants lived perpetually on the brink of famine or whether careful planning kept them mostly fed. From where you sit, bread in hand, you know it is both. Careful planning stretches survival, but the brink is always close enough to feel breathing on your neck. As night falls, you wrap the remaining loaves in cloth and tuck them into the chest, whispering a promise to yourself. Tomorrow you will guard them just as fiercely. Bread is not only food, it is memory, ritual, the pulse of the village. You close your eyes, the taste of coarse rye lingering, and murmur sarcastically to no one in particular, "Another day, another delicacy." The children giggle, and in their laughter, the hunger softens again. The scent of smoke lingers in your hair and clothing long after the fire has burned low, but tonight the smell is richer, heavier, almost mouth-watering. Hanging from the rafters above the hearth are strips of salted pork and smoked fish, their darkened edges curled and glistening. You tilt your head back to look at them, the way you might gaze at stars on a clear night. They are treasures, suspended above you, reminders that clever hands and patient labour could cheat winter's hunger just a little longer. Salt is your ally, though it is no gift. It is a costly thing. You remember walking miles to a nearby town for the annual salt fair, where merchants in fur hats piled white crystals into sacks. The price stung your purse like a wasp sting, but without salt, meat rots within days. With it, you can preserve flesh for weeks, even months. You rub it into cuts of pork, pressing deep into crevices until the meat looks ghostly. Then it rests in barrels, layered like treasure chests, dripping brine. Smoking is the next step, fire coaxing wood into fragrant whispers that cling to flesh. Hickory, oak, sometimes applewood. The scents differ, but the result is the same, strips of meat that defy the season. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers ate meat regularly or if it was mostly for feast days. but here in your smoky cottage, you know the truth is mixed. On ordinary days, you stretch thin broths and gnaw hard bread. On better days, you slice a strip of pork, tough but flavorful. Chew it slowly, letting the salt burn your tongue and the fat melt faintly. A single bite feels like a banquet when your belly has been empty for too long. You climb onto a stool and cut a strip from the rafters, your knife squeaking against the dried fibers. The children cheer, though they quickly hush themselves when you raise a stern eyebrow. You slice thin slivers, handing each child a piece no bigger than your thumb. They chew in silence, reverent, savoring every grain of salt. You take your own piece last, chewing slowly, eyes closing as flavor spreads. Ah, you sigh theatrically, better than roast swan at the king's table. Your spouse laughs, rolling her eyes, though she licks her lips like she believes you. Salted fish is another staple. The sea is far, but trade brings barrels of herring to the village once a year. You remember last summer's fair, when carts arrived with their briny cargo. Villagers jostled and shouted, clutching purses, bargaining fiercely. You bought 2 small barrels, though the smell was so strong it seemed the fish had already climbed into your nose. Now, in the depths of winter, you pry open one of those barrels, brine stinging your hands, and pull out a leathery herring. You soak it in water overnight, softening it before tossing it into the pot. The broth it makes is salty, pungent, and oddly comforting. The children wrinkle their noses but drink eagerly anyway. There are quirks too, little tricks passed down. A neighbour swears that sprinkling ashes over meat keeps insects away during storage. Another insists that honey can preserve flesh indefinitely, though none of you have enough honey to test the claim. Some villagers tell tales of noble feasts where entire stags are salted and smoked, enough to feed an army. You chuckle, imagining yourself gnawing venison beside a golden chalice. Then you look down at your chipped wooden bowl and shake your head. Same thing, right? You mutter, biting into fish skin tough as leather. In the evenings, the smoke grows thicker as the fire is stoked to keep the rafters warm. You cough, eyes watering, but you endure because the smoke is not only a nuisance, it is a guardian. It dries the meat, wards off rot, seeps into every pore of the flesh. You pat your child's shoulder and say, "Every cough is worth another bite tomorrow." They laugh weakly, though they cough again seconds later, doubling your point. Historians still debate whether smoking huts were common in villages or whether most households managed preservation directly in their cottages. In your life, there is no debate. You smoke what you can, where you can, because waiting for proper facilities is a fool's luxury. The rafters are blackened, the beams sticky with years of grease, and sometimes the smell is overwhelming. But that smell means life. The cow in the corner watches you slice meat and moos softly, as if in protest. You wag a finger at her, teasing, "Don't worry, you're not invited to the rafters yet." The children giggle, though they glance nervously at the animal. Everyone knows desperate winters have driven families to slaughter livestock, even breeding stock meant for spring. It is a last resort, a choice as heavy as stone. Warmth tonight, starvation tomorrow. You push the thought away, stroke the cow's nose and whisper, "Not this year." The day continues, marked by small indulgences. A thin strip of pork shared at midday, a herring broth at supper. The children lick their bowls, eyes bright with fleeting joy. Your spouse hums softly, mending a cloak by firelight. You lean back against the wall, chewing the last of your meat slowly, and allow yourself a rare sigh of contentment. For one evening, the gnawing in your belly has quieted, replaced by the burn of salt and the smoky tang of survival. As the fire fades, you hang the remaining strips carefully, smoothing them as though they were fine linens. They sway gently in the draught, glowing faintly in the firelight. You murmur, "Guardians of tomorrow." before settling onto the straw pallet. Your children snuggle close, their breath steady, their bellies slightly fuller. The cow shifts again, warm and steady, and you close your eyes. Historians still argue whether such small luxuries truly improved survival rates or simply delayed the inevitable. But as you drift into sleep, smoke heavy in your lungs, salt lingering on your lips, you know one thing for certain. Tonight, at least, you are not starving. And in winter, that is victory enough. The morning greets you with a chill that seeps even deeper than usual, and you know what task lies ahead. Today, you descend into the root cellar, the silent earthen vault where the last remnants of autumn still wait in the dark. You open the trapdoor carefully, the hinges groaning like an old man's knees, and a damp, earthy breath rises up. The children wrinkle their noses, though you hush them with a smile. That smell is the perfume of survival. The steps are uneven, carved roughly into the ground. You carry a lantern, its tallow flame sputtering in the draught, casting nervous shadows on the dirt walls. Cobwebs cling to corners, and beads of moisture glisten like pearls along the timbers that hold the cellar in place. Down here, the air is cool, constant, like time has slowed. This is no luxury pantry, it is a cave of hope, and each basket, each sack is a promise made by your past self to your future one. You crouch by a wicker basket brimming with turnips. Their skins are pale, mottled, some sprouting wiry roots that curl like old men's beards. You pick one up, turning it in your hands, tapping it gently. It is soft at one end. You sigh, slicing away the spoiled portion with a knife, then tuck the remaining flesh into your sack. The waste is tossed aside, but even waste has value. Later, the chickens will peck at it, turning scraps into eggs. Nothing is ever truly discarded here. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers were skilled at long-term food storage, or whether spoilage was a constant scourge that claimed half the harvest before spring. In your dim cellar, you know the truth leans toward the latter. No matter how carefully you line baskets with straw or hang onions in braids from beams, rot creeps in eventually. You see it now, an onion collapsing into slime, its once bright layers reduced to foul mush. You mutter, "Farewell, soldier," before scooping it out with 2 fingers, grimacing at the stench. Still, treasures remain. You find parsnips, knobby and pale, still firm to the touch. Carrots, too, their orange dulled but intact. The best are apples stored in straw, their skins wrinkled but their cores still sweet. You lift one to your nose, inhale its faint perfume, and smile. A banquet, you whisper, tucking it carefully into your sack. You decide to save it for your children, imagining their eyes widening at the taste of something truly sweet in a season so bitter. The lantern flickers again, and shadows sway across the cellar. You remember stories of neighbors who swore spirits guarded their root cellars, phantoms of ancestors who ensured the food lasted through winter. You chuckle quietly, whispering, "If you're down here, at least keep the onions fresh." Humor makes the dark less oppressive, though you still hurry your work. You pull potatoes from a bin, their skins rough, some sprouting pale shoots like fingers reaching for the surface. You snap the shoots off, knowing they sap strength from the tuber. Your sack grows heavier, and with it your spirit lightens. Each vegetable you gather is another meal, another night won against the cold. You glance once more at the shelves, mentally calculating what remains, enough for weeks perhaps, if rationed carefully. Climbing the steps again, you emerge into the cottage, the sudden brightness making your eyes water. Your family gathers quickly, peering into the sack. The children cheer softly when they see the apple, though you hush them, holding it back like a secret treasure for later. You lay out the turnips, onions and potatoes on the table, their earthy smell filling the room. Your spouse nods approvingly, already planning stews and broths. Midday, you peel the vegetables, slicing them into chunks. They drop into the pot with satisfying thuds, water splashing slightly onto the hearth. You add a pinch of salt, nothing more, and the pot begins to bubble. The scent is sharp, hearty, almost indulgent compared to the thin broths of past days. Your son leans over eagerly, inhaling, and you tap his nose with the spoon. Patience, you warn, though your own stomach grumbles as loudly as his. When the stew is ready, you ladle it into bowls. Everyone eats slowly, savouring each bite. The potatoes melt softly, the onions sweeten the broth, the turnips add their earthy bite. Your youngest grins, declaring, "Better than roasted goose." You laugh, raising your spoon in salute. "Indeed, my lord, your feast is served." Sarcasm and imagination weave together, turning a humble stew into a memory worth keeping. As the day wanes, you return to the cellar one last time, this time with your daughter in tow. She clutches the lantern nervously, eyes wide at the shadows. You teach her how to inspect each basket, how to feel for rot, how to stack vegetables so air can move between them. "These tricks," you whisper, "are our shield against winter. Remember them." She nods solemnly, though she giggles when a mouse scurries across the floor. You chase it away, muttering, "Cheeky thief," though part of you envies its freedom to gnaw without worry. Historians still argue whether medieval cellars were artfully engineered structures or simply pits dug hastily into the ground. Yours feels like both, rough, damp, but surprisingly effective. It is not perfection, but it is survival, and in winter those two words are close enough. That night, as you prepare to sleep, you bring out the apple. You cut it into thin slices, handing each child a piece no bigger than a coin. They bite carefully, savouring the sweetness as though it were honey. Their eyes close, smiles spreading across their faces. You take your own piece last, the taste reminding you of autumn's warmth, of orchards heavy with fruit, of sunlight you can barely remember. For a moment, spring feels possible again. You settle into the straw pallet, the taste lingering on your tongue, and whisper sarcastically, "Fine dining, courtesy of the cellar." The children laugh sleepily, and you close your eyes, comforted by the knowledge that beneath your feet, in the damp earth, more treasures wait for tomorrow. The morning light slants weakly through the cracks in the shutters, but you don't reach for water. Instead, you reach for a wooden mug half filled with weak ale. The liquid is cloudy, pale, and smells faintly of bread. It isn't indulgence, it is necessity. In winter, the village wells freeze solid, and even when you can crack through the ice, the water is often murky, crawling with sickness. Ale, however weak, is safer. You sip, wincing at the sourness, and let the warmth spread faintly down your throat. Your children gather their own mugs, each smaller than yours, filled with watered-down ale. They giggle as they drink, cheeks flushing, not from drunkenness, but from the simple novelty. Weak ale is hardly intoxicating, it is more like liquid bread, a byproduct of the same grains that sustain you. Still, you tease them. Careful, drink too much and you'll start singing tavern songs. Your eldest snorts, better than coughing all day. Historians still argue whether children drank ale daily or if it was mostly for adults. In your cottage, the truth is plain. Ale is safer than water, and safety trumps preference. The small beer, as it is sometimes called, has little alcohol, just enough to kill the unseen dangers lurking in stagnant wells. You take another sip, smacking your lips, and mutter sarcastically, "Vintage of last Tuesday, aged to perfection." Your spouse laughs, shaking her head, though she lifts her mug all the same. Brewing ale is its own ritual. You remember the autumn harvest when you threshed barley in the fields, beating the stalks with flails until grains spilled like gold. Those grains were soaked, sprouted, dried, then mashed in great wooden tubs. Water was added, yeast too, though you hardly understood the science of it. To you, it was magic, the way bubbling froth transformed into something drinkable, something that kept death at bay. You boiled the myrrh, ash stirred with long paddles, then poured it into casks to ferment. The scent filled the cottage for days, yeasty and sharp, making your children wrinkle their noses. But when the brew was ready, every household sighed with relief. The ale isn't strong enough to make you stumble, though some villagers do brew stronger batches for feast days. Those casks are guarded carefully, saved for Christmas or Carnival. But the everyday ale, thin and mild, is your constant companion. You drink it in the morning, at midday, at night. It washes down bread, stretches thin stews, fills bellies when food runs short. It is not joy, it is insurance. At midday you sit at the table, dipping bread into a mug of ale, letting the crust soften. The children copy you, their mugs clinking softly. The cow in the corner moos, and you raise your mug in mock salute. To you, noble beast, may your milk flow forever. The children laugh, and your spouse rolls her eyes, but the humour lightens the hunger that still claws at you. The village well is a sorry sight now. You walk there later, bucket in hand, hoping for a little water to stretch the ale. The rope creaks as you lower the bucket, but when you pull it up, the water is icy, slushy, flecked with dirt. You grimace, dipping a finger in, tasting bitterness. You know it is dangerous. People who drink it too often fall ill with fevers, their bellies cramping until they can no longer rise. You mutter, a toast to misery, and pour the water out onto the snow. Better to waste it than to risk it. Back home you check the ale cask, knocking on the wood to hear the hollow thud. It is half empty already, and the season is far from over. You calculate silently, wondering if you'll need to brew another batch before spring. But brewing in winter is harder. The cold slows fermentation and fuel is scarce. Still, you know it may be necessary. Without ale, thirst becomes as sharp as hunger. Historians still debate how much ale the average peasant consumed. Some say a gallon a day, others argue far less. From where you sit, wiping foam from your beard, the numbers hardly matter. What matters is that ale keeps you alive, keeps your children from coughing themselves into graves, keeps your spouse steady through endless days of cold. In the evenings, ale becomes almost social. Neighbours gather in cottages, mugs in hand, swapping stories, trading gossip, sometimes singing songs. Tonight, you host two friends, each clutching a mug filled from your cask. They toast half-heartedly, then slump near the fire, their faces drawn with hunger. One jokes, "At least the ale makes us forget the bread is gone." You reply, "If only we could brew loaves the same way." The laughter is weary but real, and for a moment you feel less alone. Children sprawl on the floor, giggling, their cheeks flushed. They hum along as one neighbour sings a tune about a miller's daughter and a runaway goose. The melody is simple, the words silly, but the sound fills the cottage, pushing back the silence of snow outside. You raise your mug again, pretending it is fine wine, and declare, "Long live the goose." The children clap, and the cow moos as if in agreement. Later, when your guests leave, you sit alone with your spouse, staring into the fire. The cask looms in the corner, shadowed, its supply dwindling. You whisper, "We'll stretch it. We must." She nods, though her eyes linger on it with worry before. In bed, you pour one last mug, smaller than before, and share it between your children. They sip drowsily, murmuring thanks before curling into their blankets. You drink the last swallow yourself, the bitterness settling in your belly like a promise. You set the mug down, close your eyes, and whisper with sarcasm, "To tomorrow's hangover of hunger." Historians still argue whether ale dulled the edge of despair or merely numbed it briefly. In your cottage, the answer is clear. It does both. The ale cannot end the winter, but it can soften its teeth. And as you drift into uneasy sleep, the faint warmth of that last sip clings to you, fragile but real, like a candle flickering in endless snow. The first thing you notice is the creak of the ice beneath your boots. The river, once a flowing artery of trade and life, now lies frozen solid, its surface white and glittering under the pale winter sun. Today is market day, and though the journey is risky, you strap a bundle of wool and a few spare candles to your back. You glance at your spouse, who wraps your children in cloaks, whispering for them to behave while you are gone. She hands you a kiss for luck, though she jokes with a dry smile, "Try not to drown if the ice decides you're too heavy." You reply with equal sarcasm, "If I fall in, at least it'll be a bath." The children giggle, though their eyes betray worry. The market is not in your village, it is across the river, where neighbouring hamlets gather to trade. You step carefully, one foot in front of the other, your bundle swaying on your shoulders. The ice groans faintly, and your heart jumps. Every crack sounds like doom. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers used frozen rivers as trade routes more often than they used bridges, but here you know the truth. In winter, ice is the only road you have. Around you, other villagers shuffle cautiously, some leading sleds laden with goods. One man pulls a cart piled with firewood, the logs bound with rope. A woman follows with baskets of dried herbs. Children scurry, too light to worry about cracks, their laughter skipping across the ice like stones. You grit your teeth, muttering, "Of course they're laughing. Wait until they fall in." Yet a part of you envies their fearlessness. At the far bank, the market begins to stir. Tents and stalls are meagre compared to summer's abundance, but still, the place hums with life. Smoke curls from a brazier where someone roasts chestnuts, their scent sweet and warm, making your stomach ache with longing. Merchants in saffron and russet cloaks shout offers too, their breath steaming in the air. Wicker baskets spill over with turnips, onions, dried beans, candles and bits of cloth. It is not plenty, but it is choice, and choice itself feels like wealth in the middle of winter. You unstrap your bundle and lay out your offerings, wool spun by your spouse, rough but warm, dyed in faded indigo. Candles, small but precious, poured from tallow saved over weeks. You call out your wares, your voice cracking in the cold. Soon a man approaches, his hands red from the wind. He fingers the wool, nods, and offers 3 onions in return. You haggle gently, pressing for 5. He frowns, scratches his beard, then tosses in a sprig of dried sage. You clasp hands, the deal sealed, and exchange goods. Bartering is more than trade, it is theatre. You laugh at a neighbour's complaint that his barley is worth more than your candles. He counters with exaggerated outrage, claiming his barley cures coughs. You reply, "Only if you choke on it first." The laughter ripples through those nearby, lightening the heavy air. Sarcasm is your armour, your way of keeping hunger from sinking too deeply into your bones. You wander the stalls, your eyes hungry as your stomach. You see salted fish, their skins stiff and shiny. You see coarse bread loaves, dark as stone. You see honeycomb, golden and dripping, guarded fiercely by its seller. You barter for a small piece of fish, offering a strip of wool. The merchant eyes you suspiciously, but agrees. The fish smells briny strong, and you tuck it into your pack, already imagining it simmering in broth. Children chase one another through the crowd, their cheeks flushed red. One bumps into you, nearly toppling your basket. You catch it just in time, muttering, "Careful, lad, or you'll end up traded for onions." The boy laughs nervously and scampers away. Around you, neighbours share news: who has fallen ill, who still has grain, who heard wolves near the woods last night. Gossip travels as swiftly as goods, binding the villages together with invisible threads. Historians still argue whether medieval markets were truly lively in winter or if they dwindled to almost nothing. Standing here, listening to the chatter and the bargaining, you know they are lively enough. Hunger forces people together as much as it drives them apart. Markets are not luxuries, they are lifelines. You pause at a brazier where chestnuts roast. The vendor offers you one for a sliver of wool. You hesitate, then agree. The nut is hot in your hand, its shell cracking easily. You bite into it, and sweetness floods your mouth, rich and smoky. For a moment, you close your eyes, transported away from the frozen river, away from hunger, into pure indulgence. You whisper sarcastically, "Better than any noble's feast," though you know in your heart it might actually be true. As the day wanes, the market begins to scatter. People clutch their bundles tightly, retreating toward their villages before the dark falls. You sling your pack over your shoulders, heavier now with onions, sage, and fish. You step once more onto the frozen river, the ice groaning beneath the weight of dozens of feet and sleds. Your breath catches with every creak, but you keep moving, muttering, "If I fall in, at least I'll save the firewood." The joke comforts no one but yourself. Back in your village, you unload your treasures. The children crowd around, eyes wide at the onions and fish. You hold the apple-sized onion high, declare, "King, behold, the crown jewel of supper." They laugh, though their laughter trembles with hunger. Your spouse tucks the sage carefully into a cloth pouch, promising to flavor stews for weeks. That night, you simmer fish, onion, and sage in a pot. The smell fills the cottage, rich and briny, making everyone's mouths water. You ladle it out carefully, watching your children's eyes shine as they slurp eagerly. For once, the broth tastes of more than boiled roots. It tastes of the market, of barter, of survival stitched together from many hands. Historians still argue whether markets served as centers of resilience or simply brief distractions from hardship. In your world, the answer is clear. They are both. They are where you trade, laugh, gossip, and remember that winter, however harsh, cannot freeze community entirely. As you settle onto your straw pallet that night, belly warmed by broth, you close your eyes with a faint smile. The frozen river still creaks in your memory, but so does the laughter of neighbors, the cheer of haggling, the sweetness of chestnuts. And you whisper softly, half to yourself, half to the dark, "Another day stolen from the winter's jaws." Night descends early, as it always does in the deep of winter, and the world contracts into a small circle of flickering light. Inside your cottage, the hearth smoulders faintly, but wood is too precious to waste on brightness. Instead, you reach for a stub of tallow candle, its surface uneven, hardened drips forming ridges like tiny wax mountains. You strike flint and steel, coaxing a spark onto a twist of dried grass, then touch it to the wick. A wavering flame leaps up, trembling against the draught, and suddenly the cottage is alive with shadows. The candle's glow is dim, far weaker than the fire, but it has its own kind of magic. It pushes back the blackness just enough to see the outlines of your family's faces, the curve of a bowl on the table, the gleam of your child's eyes as they watch the flame dance. Beyond that circle, the room falls into mystery, shapes swelling and shrinking as shadows leap across the walls. Your youngest whispers, "Look, father, the wall is alive." You smile, holding up your hand to cast a giant shadow. "Behold, the monster of the candle kingdom," you growl, wiggling your fingers like claws. The children shriek with laughter, their fear briefly erased by imagination. But candles are precious. Each one represents hours of labor. You remember pouring them in autumn, dipping wicks again and again into hot tallow, the smell of rendered fat clinging to your clothes. Some wealthier folk use beeswax, golden and fragrant, but that luxury is beyond you. Your candles smoke faintly, smelling of animal grease, but they give light, and in winter, light is as valuable as food. Historians still argue whether peasants used candles daily or saved them only for the darkest nights. In your cottage, the answer is obvious. Each stub is rationed carefully, brought out when work or fear demands it. By candlelight, chores continue. Your spouse sits hunched, mending a cloak with careful stitches. her needle glinting as it catches the flame. The children huddle together, whispering stories, their hands cupped around the candle as if shielding a sacred relic. You grind grain slowly, the millstone rasping in rhythm with the flame's flicker. Every task takes twice as long in the dim light. You drop a kernel, squinting, searching for it on the dirt floor. Finally, you mutter sarcastically, "Gone forever, stolen by candle goblins." Your daughter giggles and offers her own tale. "The goblins eat what we drop, but only at night." You nod gravely, as though this is a truth all adults know. The darkness outside presses close. Through the cracks in the shutters, you see the faint white shimmer of snow, but little else. Without moonlight, the night is absolute, swallowing sound and sight. You wonder how far the candle's glow can be seen from outside. Could it draw a wandering traveller, a hungry wolf? You whisper a half prayer as you shield the flame, reminding yourself that this little stub is not only light, but also a beacon. As the hours stretch, the candle burns lower, wax dripping steadily into the clay holder. Shadows grow taller, stranger. One seems to stretch across the wall like a bent old woman. Another flickers like a hound crouching near the door. Your son gasps, clutching your sleeve. You laugh softly, ruffling his hair. "Only shadows, lad. They bark but don't bite." Yet even you feel unease. Shadows and superstition dance hand in hand here. Some neighbours swear shadows at night are omens, warnings from the dead, or signs of storms to come. Historians still debate whether such fears were widespread or exaggerated by later chroniclers. For you, the debate is meaningless. Fear feels real enough when the shadows lean so close. Your spouse sets aside her sewing and lights a second candle. For a moment the room brightens and you all sigh in relief. The two flames together seem mighty, chasing shadows back to the corners. You mutter, "A palace of light," and your children clap in delight, though you feel a pang. 2 candles burned in one night is a luxury you can scarcely afford. Still, you let it happen. Small comforts matter. You recall village tales of Candlemas when people bring candles to the church to be blessed. Priests claim the blessed flames guard against storms and sickness. You aren't sure if you believe it, but the memory warms you. Once, as a boy, you carried a candle so tall you could barely lift it, its wax dripping onto your fingers. The priest's words echoed as the flame flickered. Light drives away darkness, faith drives away fear. Tonight, in your cottage, those words seem true enough. Tasks done, you gather close, the candles at the center. Your daughter carves little figures from scraps of wood, holding them against the flame so their shadows parade across the wall. A king, a knight, a dragon, they march in silent procession larger than life. Your son joins in, making his own dragon shadow with his hands, its jaws snapping at the carved knight. You laugh, adding your own, a rooster with flapping wings. The cottage fills with laughter, the game simple but powerful. Shadows that once seemed threatening now become playthings, turned harmless by imagination. Historians still argue whether candlelight extended the productive hours of peasant households significantly or only served for play and prayer. Tonight you see both. Your spouse's cloak is mended, your grain ground, your children entertained, all under the gaze of 2 trembling flames. It is not daylight, but it is enough. As the night deepens, the candles shrink further. Wax pools around the holders, dripping onto the table in frozen rivulets. You know the stubs will not last much longer. You sigh, lifting one and blowing it out. Darkness rushes back, leaving only a single flame. The children whimper, but you soothe them. One is plenty. The shadows know who's boss now. You wink, and they smile, reassured by your feigned bravado. Finally, the last candle sputters. The flame dances wildly, shrinking, stretching, then winks out. Darkness falls heavy, absolute. Only the faint glow of embers remains, painting the cottage in dull red. You lie down among your family, their warmth pressing close. Your children whisper about the shadows they saw, wondering if the dragon will return tomorrow. You murmur, half asleep, "If it does, I'll feed it bread so tough it'll break its teeth." Their laughter is soft, fading into sleep. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants feared the dark more than hunger itself. Lying here, eyes closed, you cannot separate the two. Darkness and hunger are twins, gnawing at body and spirit alike. Yet tonight, thanks to 2 humble stubs of tallow, you faced both and laughed. And as you drift into slumber, the memory of flickering candlelight lingers, bright enough to soften the edges of night. By the time another snowstorm howls over the village, you already feel the weight of sameness pressing in. The walls of the cottage seem closer, the smoke thicker, the fire smaller. There is food, though it is thin, and there is light, though faint. What gnaws at you now is something different. Boredom, the kind of restless, endless drag that stretches every day into a grey copy of the last. You sit by the fire, knife in hand, carving a spoon from a block of wood. The shavings curl away like pale ribbons, piling at your feet. The work is slow, deliberate, and you do not even need the spoon. You have plenty already. But your hands need something to do, and your mind craves a distraction. You mutter sarcastically, "Another masterpiece for the royal collection," and hold up the half-finished spoon like a trophy. Your spouse chuckles, shaking her head as she threads a needle, mending a sock for the 100th time. The children invent games to pass the hours. One counts the cracks in the ceiling beams, another draws figures in the dirt floor with a stick. They laugh when their crude sketches of pigs and chickens come to life in their imaginations. Your eldest dares the youngest to see how many times he can spin in place before falling onto the straw. He collapses in a heap, dizzy, and everyone laughs, though the joy is fleeting. Soon they are restless again, pacing like caged birds. Historians still argue whether boredom truly plagued medieval peasants or if the sheer press of labour left little room for idleness. But winter is not harvest or sowing season. The fields are frozen, the rivers still, the animals sluggish. Work exists, yes, but it is maintenance, mending, patching, feeding, waiting. Long hours stretch with nothing new to break them. You know boredom is as real as hunger and nearly as sharp. To fight it, you tell stories, old tales of knights and saints, of miracles and monsters. You exaggerate details to keep the children wide-eyed, making a dragon's scales gleam like emeralds or a saint's halo shine brighter than the moon. Sometimes you slip in sarcasm, describing a knight so clumsy he trips over his own sword. The children howl with laughter, and even your spouse cracks a smile. Storytelling passes the time, but it also builds a bridge between you and your children, between memory and imagination, between despair and survival. One story you tell often is of the farmer who fooled death itself. You describe how the farmer, tired of winter, tricked death into climbing a tree, then trapped him there until spring returned. So, you conclude, that's why we still have winter. Death learned his lesson, but only half. Your youngest frowns. Why not trap him forever? You shrug, replying with mock seriousness, because then the cows would live forever, and we'd run out of grass. Everyone laughs, though behind it lingers the truth. Death is never far from your mind in winter. When stories grow old, you sing simple tunes, chants passed down from your parents. The children clap in rhythm, their voices rising above the storm outside. Sometimes you invent verses as you go, turning chores into song. Stir the pot, don't let it rot, feed your belly, or die on the spot. The children giggle, joining in, repeating the rhyme until it becomes a kind of spell, warding off the gloom. Historians still debate whether peasants sang as much as records suggest, or whether songs were exaggerated by romantic poets. For you, song is not art, it is medicine for the spirit. The storm rages for days, snow piling higher against the door, but you barely notice. Inside, time slows. You carve another spoon, your spouse sews another patch, your children invent another game. Each act is small, but together they form a rhythm, the rhythm of endurance. Still, there are moments when silence presses too hard. You catch yourself staring at the fire, eyes glazed, thinking of nothing at all. You shake your head, muttering sarcastically, "Well, there's today wasted beautifully." Quirky habits emerge too. Your son collects candle drippings, shaping them into little figures he calls his army. Your daughter braids straw into necklaces, wearing them proudly as if they were gold chains. Your spouse begins keeping a tally of coughs heard from each neighbor's house, as if counting illness can ward it off. You tease her gently. "Shall I write a song about coughs?" She swats your shoulder, laughing. These small oddities keep the edge of madness at bay. One evening, after hours of silence, you hear a knock at the door. A neighbor enters, shaking snow from his russet cloak. His cheeks roar from the wind. He carries nothing. He comes only for company. You pour him a mug of weak ale, and soon the cottage fills with talk. He tells a tale of wolves spotted near the woods, their eyes glowing like lanterns. Your children gasp, clutching blankets tighter. You counter with a jest. "Perhaps the wolves are just cold and want to borrow our spoons." The neighbor laughs, though his eyes remain wary. Even boredom can be broken by fear. Historians still argue whether communal visits in winter were frequent or rare, given the risks of travel. Tonight you see their value. Conversation lifts spirits, reshapes monotony into memory. You trade jokes, gossip, even a game of dice scratched into the dirt. The hours pass more quickly, and when the neighbor leaves you feel lighter though the storm outside has softened. The next day, the sky clears and the snow sparkles under pale sunlight. Yet boredom creeps back quickly. You carve another spoon, your fifth in as many days. Your spouse sighs, holding it up. "Do you plan to open a shop?" You grin, replying, "Only if kings start buying." The children laugh, though their eyes are tired. Even jokes wear thin eventually. Still, you endure. You teach your children how to whittle, how to mend small tears, how to count with stones. You play riddles by the fire, asking them, "What has no mouth but speaks, no wings but flies?" They guess wildly, ghosts, wolves, bread. Finally, you reveal the answer, the wind. They groan, calling it unfair, but they laugh all the same. As night falls, you feel the weight of sameness again, but you also recognize its strange gift. Boredom teaches patience. It strips life down to its simplest forms, carving wood, sewing cloth, telling stories, sharing laughter. You curl under the blankets with your family, listening to their breathing, and whisper sarcastically, "Another thrilling day in paradise." Your spouse chuckles, pressing close. Historians still argue whether peasants cursed boredom or embraced it as rest between labours. For you, boredom is both enemy and companion. It gnaws at your mind, but it also binds your family closer, forces you to invent joy from scraps, just as you stretch stew from bones. And as you drift into sleep, you know tomorrow will be the same, and somehow that sameness is survival. The cold presses in, but tonight it feels different. Tonight the air hums with anticipation, with a kind of stubborn joy that even winter cannot smother. It is the time of festivals, the brief spark of celebration in the middle of the darkness. Your family gathers their meagre supplies, bundling up cloaks of russet and indigo, wrapping scarves tightly. The children's cheeks glow red as they chatter excitedly about the feast. You tease them with mock severity. "Don't expect peacock pie, you'll be lucky to get bread with onions." They giggle anyway, too caught up in the thrill. You walk to the centre of the village, where the snow has been trampled flat by dozens of feet. A great bonfire roars there, its flames clawing at the night, sparks leaping upward like stars breaking free of the earth. People crowd close, stamping their feet, warming their hands, faces lit orange in the glow. The fire's warmth is shocking after weeks of smoky hearths. Suddenly you feel alive again, not just enduring but truly living. Christmas is the first of these celebrations, though it looks little like the noble pageants sung of in distant towns. Here the feast is simple. Bread loaves saved carefully, a strip of salted pork, a pot of pottage thickened with beans, yet the sharing of it makes it feel grand. Your neighbour breaks a loaf and hands you a piece, laughing. You return the gesture with a strip of pork, and soon the air is full of chatter and chewing. For one night, no one eats alone. Historians still argue whether peasants truly feasted at Christmas or if that luxury was reserved for lords, but in your village, feasting means pooling scraps until they look like plenty. The children squeal as someone pulls out a pipe and begins to play. The tune is rough, uneven, but everyone claps along. You grab your spouse's hand and spin her clumsily in the snow, both of you laughing as you kneel. You topple over. Your eldest jeers playfully. You dance like a goat on ice. You bow theatrically, replying, "Then behold, the goat king of Christmas." The crowd erupts in laughter, and for once it does not sound weary. Superstitions flavour the celebration too. A woman scatters handfuls of grain onto the snow, muttering prayers for a fertile spring. Another carries a carved wooden star, raising it high as she sings. Children carry candles, their tiny flames flickering in the night, symbols of light triumphing over darkness. You watch them march in a circle, their voices high and clear, and you feel a pang in your chest, hope, fragile but persistent. Later in the season comes Carnival, a wilder festival before the long fast of Lent. Masks are donned, crudely made from cloth and painted with soot. You fashion one for yourself, a grinning face with crooked teeth, and chase your children through the snow. They shriek, darting away until you stumble into a snowdrift, laughing. Others dress as animals, bears, wolves, even a rooster. Someone bangs a drum, another clangs a pot, and soon the square is filled with noise, laughter, chaos. For a few hours, the cold is forgotten, replaced by frenzy. Historians still debate whether rural carnival celebrations were as wild as those in cities, but for you they are wild enough. Men drink stronger ale, voices rising in bawdy songs. Women laugh freely, cheeks flushed. Even the priest, usually stern, cracks a smile as he blesses the crowd. You raise a mug of ale, foam clinging to your beard, and declare sarcastically, "To Lent, may it come slowly." The crowd roars with laughter, though you know Lent will come regardless, with its hunger sharpened by fasting. Feasts also bring quarrels, of course. Two men argue over whose family contributed more to the pot. One insists his beans were the largest, the other swears his salt was the most precious. Voices rise, fists clench, but the crowd intervenes, pulling them apart, reminding them this night is not for fighting. You mutter under your breath, "Only in winter can beans cause a war." Your spouse stifles a laugh, elbowing you to hush. Despite the quarrels, the night ends in unity. Villagers sing hymns together, voices weaving into the cold air, rising above the crackle of the fire. You close your eyes, humming along, the melody wrapping around you like a blanket. For a moment you forget the hunger, the frost, the endless sameness. All you feel is warmth, the warmth of community, of shared struggle, of laughter in the face of despair. Later, when the fire burns lower, you walk home with your family. The children stumble sleepily, their bellies fuller than they have been in weeks. Your youngest clutches a sweet given by a neighbour, a honeyed nut wrapped in cloth, and guards it fiercely as though it were a crown jewel. You chuckle softly, ruffling his hair. "Don't drop it, or I'll trade you for a turnip." He gasps in mock outrage, hugging it tighter. Back in your cottage, the fire is rekindled, the shadows dancing once more. The children collapse onto the straw, still giggling. Gee about the Goat King and the rooster masks. Your spouse hums softly, the tune from the pipe lingering in her mind. You sit by the embers, staring into the glow, and whisper sarcastically, "Well, Winter, you lost this round." Historians still argue whether festivals truly lifted spirits or merely distracted from hardship. But lying in the straw, your belly warm, your heart lighter, you know the answer. Festivals are not distractions, they are defiance. They are proof that even in the cruelest winters, people can laugh, dance, feast, and remind themselves they are alive. As you drift into sleep, the sound of hymns still echoing in your ears, you dream not of hunger, but of warmth, of fire, of laughter swirling in the snow. And for once, the darkness feels far away. The snow is piled so high against the cottage door that you must shoulder it open, pushing until the drift collapses in a puff of powder. The morning is silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy as if the world is holding its breath. Today is Sunday, and though your body aches from hunger and cold, you and your family shuffle toward the church. Faith is not optional here, it is stitched into survival, as much as bread or firewood. The church squats at the village centre, its stone walls rimed with frost, its roof sagging under the weight of snow. You step inside, and the sudden chill surprises you. The church is colder than your cottage, for no hearth smoulders here. The only heat comes from bodies pressed together, villagers packed tightly in rows, their breath rising in faint clouds. You glance at your children, cheeks pink, noses running, and whisper, "Best keep singing or you'll freeze to the pew." They giggle softly, quickly silenced by your spouse's stern glance. The priest stands at the altar, his voice echoing in the stone chamber. He speaks of storms as divine punishment, of hunger as a test of faith. Historians still argue whether such sermons truly terrified peasants or if they shrugged them off with practical cynicism. You know the answer lies somewhere in between. You nod solemnly, because everyone is watching, but inside your head you mutter, "If this is a test, I'd like to see the grading scale." Sarcasm is your shield, even in the house of God. Candles line the altar, their flames steady despite the drafts. The light flickers across faces weary with frostbite, gaunt with hunger. You look around and see hope and fear mingled in every eye. One man clutches a rosary so tightly his knuckles are white. A woman whispers prayers under her breath, her lips moving constantly. A child dozes against her mother's shoulder, lulled by the rhythm of Latin chants that none of you fully understand but all repeat faithfully. You kneel on the cold stone floor, the chill seeping into your bones. The priest raises the host, a thin wafer, and breaks it. Communion begins, and you shuffle forward with the rest. The wafer is dry, tasteless, dissolving quickly on your tongue, but you close your eyes as though it is a feast. For a brief moment, hunger feels holy, sanctified. You whisper a prayer, not for riches or comfort, but simply for the snow to end sooner, for the ground to thaw, for green shoots to return. The sermon shifts to omens. The priest warns of comets seen in the sky, of eclipses that signal God's displeasure. He tells tales of villages swept away by storms, of crops blighted by sin. Your children lean close, wide-eyed. You squeeze their hands, whispering, "Don't worry. If a comet comes, we'll throw stale bread at it." They snicker, muffling laughter behind their sleeves. Even in church, humor is survival. At the end of Mass, holy water is sprinkled. The droplets freeze almost instantly on your forehead, stinging like needles. You step back into the snow, blinking at the sunlight, and the villagers scatter slowly, their voices low, carrying scraps of sermon back to their cottages. You overhear one neighbor mutter that the wolves howling last night were surely a sign of the devil's presence. Another insists the storm was punishment for someone failing to tithe. You roll your eyes, whispering sarcastically, "Perhaps God is just tired of our singing." Still, faith binds the village. Bells ring faintly, the sound muffled by snow, and for a moment it feels like defiance, as if the whole village is shouting, "We are still here." Historians still debate whether the church was truly a comfort to peasants or merely another burden. For you, it is both. The The sermons can sting, the tithes can bite, but the church also gathers you all together, reminding you that no one suffers alone. Later, back in your cottage, the children play at being priests. One lifts a crust of bread, declaring it holy. The others bow solemnly, then burst into giggles. Your spouse sighs, scolding them gently, but you laugh. Let them play. If bread can be holy once a week, why not every day? The children cheer, holding up spoons as chalices, chanting nonsense Latin. The cottage rings with laughter, brighter than any hymn. That night, you dream of the church again, the candles glowing, the priest's voice booming, the villagers kneeling. But in your dream, the altar holds not a wafer, but a steaming loaf of bread, its crust golden, its smell filling the air. The villagers rise and tear off chunks, laughing, feasting, sharing. You wake with hunger sharper than ever, but also with a strange comfort. Perhaps faith is not about miracles from above, but about the hope that tomorrow's loaf will be larger than today. Eisen historians still argue whether peasants clung to faith out of fear or love. You suspect it is both, and neither. It is necessity, like firewood, like grain. Without it, the darkness would feel too absolute. With it, even hunger can feel like a holy trial. And so, as you settle into your straw bed, you whisper a final prayer, half serious, half jest. Lord, if you're listening, please, next miracle, make it soup. You sit close to the hearth, the flames low, your children curled under blankets, when your neighbour leans through the door and whispers about charms. His face is pale, his eyes wide with superstition. He insists that wolves prowl the edges of the village because someone has angered unseen forces. You shrug at him, raising an eyebrow. Perhaps the wolves are simply hungry like the rest of us. He doesn't laugh. Instead, he presses a small bundle into your hand. A scrap of cloth tied with twine, filled with herbs and a bead of bone. Keep it near your door, he mutters. It will ward off evil. Superstition walks hand in hand with survival. You tuck the charm above the doorway, not because you believe it holds power, but because everyone else does. To ignore such a thing might tempt fate. Historians still argue whether peasants truly believed in charms or simply used them out of habit. You know, belief and habit blur together when hunger and cold erode reason. Your spouse produces another amulet, a small iron cross tied with string, worn smooth from years of handling. She places it around your daughter's neck, whispering a prayer against frostbite. The child beams proudly as though armoured. You grin and tease, "Careful, little one. That charm might make you invisible to chores." She giggles, clutching it tightly. Charms come in many forms here. Dried herbs hung above the hearth, sprigs of rowan tucked into rafters, carved symbols scratched into wooden beams. Some say they ward off sickness, others that they keep wolves from crossing the threshold. One neighbour swears by a pouch of garlic worn around the neck. Another ties bits of red cloth to his children's wrists. You chuckle, muttering, "If wolves fear garlic, perhaps they're Italian." Your spouse elbows you, but even she laughs. Stories abound of charms that work. A woman down the lane insists she buried a coin beneath her doorstep and never lost a chicken again. Another claims she carved a star into her barn door and her cow calved safely every spring thereafter. Skeptics roll their eyes, but in winter, when survival hangs by threads, no one dares risk sneering too loudly. It is better to mutter a blessing, tie a charm, and sleep a little easier. Historians still debate whether charms were tolerated by the church or condemned as superstition. The priest in your village scolds from the pulpit, warning that charms invite the devil. Yet even he carries a relic, an old bone said to be from a saint, wrapped in linen, kissed during storms. You smirk quietly at the irony. Holy charm or pagan charm both serve the same purpose, warding off fear. The children invent their own. Your son ties a pebble to a string and declares it a wolf stone. He insists it will keep the beasts away if hung on the window. You play along, solemnly nodding. A fine protection. Wolves hate pebbles. He beams, puffing his chest, proud of his creation. Your daughter weaves straw into a circle and wears it like a crown, claiming it will bring warmth to the hearth. You salute her, bowing theatrically. All hail the Straw Queen, saviour of firewood. Laughter fills the cottage, laughter that is its own charm against despair. Yet fear is real. One night you hear howls outside, long, mournful cries that echo through the frozen woods. The cow in the corner shifts nervously, the chickens cluck softly. Your spouse tightens her cloak, whispering a prayer. You grip the amulet given by your neighbour, fingers tracing the bone bead. Do you believe it will stop a wolf? Not truly, but you believe in the comfort it gives, and perhaps that is power enough. The next day, villagers whisper of tracks near the edge of the forest, large paw prints, claws gouging the snow. Some swear they saw glowing eyes in the dark. A man claims his sheep vanished overnight, the pen door torn open. He holds up a twisted scrap of red cloth, saying he found it snagged on the fence. Others nod knowingly, declaring it proof that charms failed. You mutter sarcastically, perhaps the wolf simply didn't respect fashion. A few chuckle nervously, though no one dismisses the danger. Back in your cottage you find yourself staring at the charms above your door. The bundle of herbs, the cross, the pebble stone your son tied, the straw crown your daughter hung. They sway gently in the draught, a patchwork of belief and play. For a moment you feel a strange warmth, not from fire, but from the shared conviction of your family. Whether charms work or not, they give you courage. Historians still argue whether superstition weakened faith or strengthened it, whether it was rebellion against the church or simply another tool of survival. You suspect it is both. You mutter prayers in church and hang charms at home, hedging your bets against both heaven and earth. Survival is no place for purity. It is a place for pragmatism. That evening, you gather your children close and teach them a rhyme you learned as a child. Rowan, red and ash so tall, keep the winter from our hall. They chant it, laughing, their voices rising above the storm. You smile, whispering, "There, now the charms are doubly strong." They grin, proud of their magic. You tuck them into blankets, watching their eyelids droop, and murmur sarcastically, "If this works, perhaps I'll tie a charm to the cow and ask her to cook supper." Your spouse chuckles softly, shaking her head. Before you sleep, you glance once more at the doorway, at the little bundle your neighbour gave you. The herbs are already drying, the cloth fraying, but you leave it there. Maybe it holds no power at all. Or maybe, in its small way, it keeps despair at bay, reminding you that not everything is beyond your control. And in the heart of winter, when hunger gnaws and wolves prowl, even the illusion of control can be as valuable as firewood. The cough begins softly, almost like a hiccup. At first you think nothing of it, just a tickle in your son's throat from the smoke-filled air. But by morning, the sound is deeper, harsher, echoing in the cramped cottage like a warning bell. You watch as he pulls the blanket closer, his cheeks flushed, his eyes glazed with fever. The winter has claimed many with sickness, and fear knots in your belly. You kneel by his side, pressing your hand to his forehead. It is hot, too hot, while the room around him feels like ice. You murmur to your spouse, and she nods grimly, reaching for the small basket of herbs kept for such emergencies. The collection is pitiful. Dried sage leaves, a handful of thyme, a twist of willow bark. Still, these are what you have, and you cling to them as tightly as you cling to firewood. She brews a tea, the steam rising sharp and bitter. The smell fills the air, earthy and medicinal, making the children wrinkle their noses. You coax your son to sip, holding the wooden cup to his lips. He coughs again, spilling some, but drinks the rest. You whisper, "Good lad, it'll chase the sickness away." In truth, you don't know if it will. Historians still argue whether medieval herbal remedies were effective or merely hopeful gestures. You don't care, you will try anything. The night is long. You sit awake, feeding the fire, wiping sweat from your son's brow. Your daughter stirs beside him, whispering stories to keep his mind occupied. She tells him of knights who battled frost giants, of saints who healed with a touch. He smiles faintly, though his cough interrupts. You join in, adding sarcasm to lighten the mood. This knight was so clumsy, he tripped over his own sword and scared the frost giant away. Both children giggle weakly, and for a moment the fear lifts, yet fear always returns. In the village, sickness spreads quickly. One cough in one cottage becomes 10 in a week. You hear rumours of neighbours ill, of children who will not rise from their beds. Some say it is punishment for sins, others that it is the work of evil spirits. You tighten your jaw, muttering, "If spirits enjoy coughing, they've certainly moved in here." Humour tastes bitter, but you spit it out anyway. Your spouse mixes another brew, this time crushing garlic into the pot, adding honey if there is any left. The smell is sharp, clinging to your hands, but you force your son to drink. He gags, grimaces, but swallows. You stroke his hair, murmuring, "That face alone proves it's working." He chuckles, though it quickly dissolves into another cough. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers truly feared sickness more than hunger. You know the two are linked. Hunger weakens the body, making every cough more dangerous. You look at your son's thin arms, the hollows in his cheeks, and your heart clenches. You want to give him more bread, more broth, more of everything, but the sacks are nearly empty. Sacrifice gnaws at you. Do you eat less so he may eat more? Do you trade precious firewood for honey or herbs? Every choice feels like balancing on a knife's edge. At midday, you walk to a neighbour's house, seeking advice. The woman there is known for her knowledge of herbs. She hands you a bundle of dried elderflowers, telling you to steep them in boiling water. "It will sweat the fever out," she insists. You thank her, slipping her a strip of wool in return. As you leave, she lowers her voice. "Historians may argue later," she says with a knowing smile, "but today, try the flowers." You laugh weakly, grateful for her humour, even as dread lingers. Back home, you brew the elderflower tea. Your son drinks, his skin shining with sweat. You wipe his brow, whispering encouragement. Slowly, his breathing steadies, though the cough remains. You sit beside him, exhausted, clutching the cup in your hands as though it holds more than herbs, as though it holds hope itself. Night falls again, and you dream uneasily. In your dream, the cottage is filled with coughing voices, echoing endlessly, louder and louder, until they drown out even the crackle of the fire. You wake with a start, your heart racing, only to find your son sleeping peacefully, his breath rasping but steady. Relief floods you like warmth, and you mutter, "Still here, still fighting." The days blur together. Some mornings his fever lessens, and you believe he is healing. Other nights it spikes again, and fear claws at your throat. Your daughter brings him carved toys, placing them beside his bed. She declares one a guardian knight who will fight the sickness. You smile, kissing her head, grateful for her fierce imagination. Historians still argue whether peasants relied more on herbal cures or on prayer. In truth, you rely on both. You brew every herb you can find, while your spouse whispers prayers over his bed. You hang charms by the window, and you kneel at night, muttering, "God, saint, spirit, whoever is listening, spare him." You don't care which power answers on lie that someone does. One evening, when the fever breaks for a few hours, you share a rare apple slice with him. His eyes widen at the taste, and he sighs happily. You grin, declaring, "Proof you're getting better. Your taste buds are demanding fruit like a noble." He laughs, then coughs, but the laughter lingers, warming the room more than the fire. Slowly, painfully, the days improve. The cough weakens, the fever fades. He rises from bed, pale but smiling, and takes a step toward the fire. You clap, cheering sarcastically, "Behold the miracle of walking." The children laugh and your spouse wipes tears from her eyes. Survival once again feels possible. Still, the fear never fully leaves. You know sickness can return with the next storm, the next cough. But for now, your son breathes easily and you let yourself rest. You lie on the straw pallet, your family pressed close, and whisper, "One more battle won." Historians still argue whether survival was luck, faith, or knowledge. You suspect it is all three. But tonight, as your son sleeps soundly for the first time in days, you know what matters most. He is alive. And in the heart of winter, that alone feels like a miracle. The night is quiet at first, save for the soft crackle of the fire and the occasional cough from your still recovering son. But then, faint and distant, it comes. The long, mournful howl of wolves. It drifts across the frozen forest, low and haunting, vibrating in your chest. The children stiffen under their blankets. Your spouse looks up sharply from the sewing in her lap. You freeze, listening. The howl rises again, closer this time, answered by another. The hair at the back of your neck prickles. Wolves are not strangers here. In summer they lurk in the woods, feeding on deer or scavenging near villages. But in winter they are bolder, hungrier, desperate. They come for sheep, for goats, for cows, sometimes even for people. You mutter softly, trying to sound casual. Sounds like they're holding choir practice. Your children giggle nervously, though their eyes stay wide. Humor shields them, though not you. You know how dangerous wolves can be. You rise and pull on your boots, wrapping a russet cloak around your shoulders. Outside, the snow glows faintly under a half moon. The cold is sharp, biting, but you barely notice it over the fear thudding in your chest. You step toward the small pen where the livestock are kept, lantern in hand, its flame trembling. Your cow moos anxiously inside the cottage, as though warning you not to leave. At the pen's edge, you see tracks, large paw prints pressed into the snow, circling, leading toward the trees. You swallow hard. You can feel eyes on you, watching from the dark beyond the tree line. Wolves are clever. They study. They wait. You grip the wooden staff in your hand tighter. Behind you, a neighbor approaches, carrying a torch. His face is pale, but resolute. "They're close," he mutters. You nod, whispering sarcastically, "Good. Perhaps they'll help chop wood." He doesn't laugh. Soon others join. A small knot of villagers gathers near the pen, each holding some weapon, a pitchfork, an axe, even a kitchen knife. Flames from torches flicker, casting jagged shadows across the snow. The howls echo again, this time so close you can almost feel the breath of it. Your daughter peeks from the doorway, her eyes wide. You wave her back inside, forcing a smile. "Stay by the fire, little one. The wolves don't like smoke." You aren't sure if that's true, but she obeys. Historians still argue whether wolves truly attacked humans in medieval Europe as often as legends suggest, or whether famine and fear exaggerated the danger. But here in this moment, the danger feels real enough. You can see shapes moving between the trees, low, grey, and silent. One wolf steps forward, its eyes catching the firelight glowing unnaturally bright. Your stomach tightens. The villagers shout, waving torches, clanging pots, banging sticks together. The sound echoes in the cold night, a wall of noise meant to frighten the beasts. For a moment, it works. The shapes retreat into the shadows. But then another howl splits the air, this one closer, and you realize the pack is circling. Your heart hammers. You remember old tales. Hang charms at the doors, sprinkle ashes in a ring, draw crosses in the snow. Your neighbor swears he saw a wolf once leap backward at the sight of a holy relic. Others laugh at such stories, saying wolves fear only fire and steel. You grip your staff tighter, whispering sarcastically, "Perhaps they'll run if I show them my spoon collection." The joke steadies your nerves, if only slightly. The wolves do not attack that night. After an hour of shouting and torch waving, the shapes melt back into the forest. Slowly the villagers disperse, their faces weary but relieved. You return to the cottage, your children rushing to you, clinging tightly. They're gone. You reassure them, though your own Voice wavers. Your spouse touches your arm, whispering, "For now." Sleep is uneasy. Every creak of the rafters, every gust of wind against the door sounds like paws in the snow. You dream of glowing eyes, of teeth flashing in the dark. You wake several times, listening for howls, clutching your staff. Each time, the silence feels heavier. The next morning, rumours ripple through the village. A sheep was taken from a neighbour's pen, blood staining the snow. Another swears he saw wolves pacing near the churchyard. Fear thickens the air. Some call for a hunt. Others insist it is too dangerous. Historians still argue whether villagers banded together often for wolf hunts or left such tasks to nobles and their men. In your village, the decision is simple. You cannot spare lives recklessly. Fire and vigilance must suffice. You help reinforce the pen, driving wooden stakes deeper into the frozen ground, piling snow against the walls. Your children scatter ash around the perimeter, chanting rhymes they claim will ward off wolves. You smile, encouraging them, though you know ash alone won't stop hungry beasts. Still, their laughter as they chant, "Ash to snow, wolves don't go," eases the tension. That night, the howls return. They sound closer, more insistent. You and the neighbours gather again, torches blazing, voices shouting. The wolves linger longer this time, shadows pacing just beyond the firelight. You glimpse their teeth, white against the dark. Your heart pounds, but you stand firm, your children watching from inside, their small faces pressed to the window. You raise your torch high, shouting into the night, "Not tonight." Eventually, the wolves retreat again, melting into the forest, but you know they will return. Hunger drives them as surely as it drives you. In some ways, you almost pity them. You whisper to your spouse, "They're just villagers in fur, starving like us." She nods silently, though fear shadows her eyes. Histos. Rians still debate whether wolf packs truly haunted villages through the entire winter or only during harsh famine years. You don't need debate. You hear them every night now, their howls part of the rhythm of winter, like the crackle of fire, the cough of children, the groan of frozen wood. Wolves are your neighbours, unwelcome but constant. Before bed, you check the charms at the door, the herbs, the cross, the pebble your son tied. They sway in the draught, fragile guardians. You pat them lightly, whispering, "Do your work tonight." Then you curl under the blankets with your family, the cow shifting uneasily beside you, the chickens restless in their roost. Outside, the howls rise again, long and low, as if the forest itself is hungry. You close your eyes, heart pounding, and mutter sarcastically, "Another lullaby, courtesy of wolves." Your children giggle faintly, clinging tighter. Somehow, despite the fear, you drift into sleep, carried by the sound of both menace and survival. The wolves may stalk the edges of the forest, but the greatest predators live in stone halls. You hear their feasting long before you see it, songs carried on the wind, the clash of tankards, the barking of hounds inside the Lord's manor. Tonight, while your family gnaws on coarse bread and thin broth, your imagination drifts toward the castle on the hill. Its windows glow like golden eyes above the dark village, promising warmth and indulgence that peasants like you will never taste. Inside those walls, you know the scene well enough from whispers and glimpses. The Lord and his household sit at a long oak table, a roaring fire crackling in the great hearth. Servants rush back and forth with trenchers piled high, venison roasted until the juices drip, geese stuffed with herbs, loaves of fine white bread that crumble delicately instead of grinding grit between your teeth. Jugs of wine and strong ale spill freely, far stronger than the weak brew you sip each day. You sigh, muttering sarcastically to your children, "I hear the Lord's hounds eat better than we do." Your daughter giggles, but the truth is sour in your mouth. Historians still argue whether nobles' feasts were as extravagant as chroniclers claimed, or whether such descriptions were exaggerated to emphasize wealth. From your perspective, there's no doubt. You've carried loads of firewood up to the manor before, and even from the courtyard you could smell the roasting meats, so rich that it made your stomach twist with envy. While nobles lounge in furs and silks, you huddle in patched wool. While they lean back on cushioned benches, you shift on straw pallets. Their walls of stone defy the storm, while your mud-plastered cottage creaks with every gust of wind. You know their winters are not the same as yours, and yet their survival depends on your labor, your taxes, your grain, your firewood. You mutter, half to yourself, half to the fire. Strange how we keep them fat while we starve. Your spouse glances at you sharply, warning you not to speak such thoughts too loudly. But your children nod, eyes wide, silently agreeing. Sometimes the Lord sends scraps to the village at feast days, bones picked clean, stale loaves of white bread gone hard. The priest proclaims it charity. You proclaim it what it is, leftovers. You once gnawed one of those bones, pretending it was venison, though in truth it was little more than marrow and splinters. Still, you ate it gratefully because hunger does not care about dignity. Yet there is fascination too. The stories of noble feasts spread quickly. A travelling peddler once described a banquet where whole peacocks were roasted, their feathers reattached afterwards so they looked alive as they were carried to the table. Your children gasped at the thought, eyes wide, and you laughed bitterly. Imagine the work just to trick your stomach into thinking it's a parade. Still, you couldn't help picturing it yourself, such excess compared to your smoky stews. Historians still debate whether peasants envied nobles bitterly or simply accepted the gulf as natural. For you, envy and acceptance intertwine. You resent their abundance, yet you know you cannot change it. Their feasting is as much a part of winter as your hunger. Both coexist, two worlds linked by obligation but divided by walls. There are moments when the difference cuts deeper. You remember a winter 2 years past when famine bit hard. Children in your village wasted away, while rumours said the Lord's dogs were fed daily with mutton. Mothers whispered curses, fathers clenched fists, but no one dared speak aloud. To defy the manor is to court ruin. You grit your teeth even now at the memory. Still, nobles are not invincible. Their feasts may overflow, but they too fear sickness, wolves, and the whims of weather. You've heard stories of castles locked tight during plagues, of lords fleeing at the first sign of fever. You mutter sarcastically to your son, "At least wolves don't charge rent." He laughs, though he does not fully understand. On holy days, the Lord sometimes invites a few peasants into the hall, more for show than kindness. You have never been chosen, though once your neighbour went. He described tables groaning under dishes, the air thick with the smell of roasted boar. He returned to the village boasting, but you noticed how he carried himself straighter afterward, as though the memory itself filled his belly. You smiled bitterly, thinking, memories don't keep ribs from showing. Back in your cottage, you mimic the feast for your children. You raise your wooden spoon like a goblet proclaiming, "To the roast swan, stuffed with apples and pears, served on silver platters." Your children cheer, lifting their own spoons, their eyes bright with the game. You continue, describing golden pies filled with venison, puddings dripping with honey. They laugh, imagining themselves nobles for an evening. Your spouse shakes her head, amused, whispering, "You'll have them dreaming of castles instead of chores." But you see the joy on their faces and continue anyway. Historians still argue whether peasants truly resented nobles' excess or found satisfaction in imagining themselves part of that grandeur, if only in dreams. You know your imagination keeps despair at bay. You may never taste roasted swan, but in the firelight, with your children's laughter ringing, you can almost believe you have. That night, you dream of the great hall. You stand at the Lord's table, tearing into venison, drinking wine that warms instead of weakens. Your children laugh beside you, their cheeks round with plenty, their hands sticky with honey. But even in the dream, you glance back at your cottage, standing small and smoky in the distance. You know you will return there when you wake, and when morning comes, you do. You rise from your straw pallet, stretch stiff limbs, and chew on hard rye bread. Yet something lingers from the dream, not bitterness, but determination. If nobles can feast while snow piles high, then peasants can endure, carving survival from roots and broth. Their feasts may be brighter, but your resilience is sharper. You smile faintly, whispering sarcastically, "Enjoy your swan, my lord. I'll enjoy still being alive." Historians still debate whether peasants saw themselves as powerless under nobles or powerful in their endurance. You suspect both are true, but in your heart you know that your winter victories, though small, are no less grand than any feast, and as you look at your children, alive, still laughing despite hunger, you know you have triumphed in your own way. The fire smoulders low, your belly aches from another night of thin stew, and the sacks in your cottage corner sag like defeated soldiers. You know the truth, your stores will not last. Hunger sharpens into desperation, and desperation drives you toward bargains. Not the cheerful haggling of the market, but the kind of agreements whispered in low voices, sealed with sweat and fear. A knock rattles the door. It is your neighbor, shoulders hunched, cloak heavy with snow. He doesn't bother with greetings. Instead, he lays a bundle of barley on the table, his eyes searching yours. "I need firewood," he says bluntly. You glance at your meager pile, logs stacked carefully beside the hearth. Each one is precious, each one a promise of warmth. But the children need grain, and the pot is nearly empty. You weigh the choice, tapping your fingers against the table. Then you nod. A log for the barley. It feels unfair. You know the effort of chopping that wood, the hours spent in freezing air. But hunger tips the scales. You make the trade, and when your neighbor leaves, you mutter sarcastically, "Enjoy the warmth. If I freeze tonight, I'll haunt you for it." Your spouse chuckles, though her eyes are tight. These are the survival bargains of winter. Not contracts written in ink, but debts written in memory. Today you trade firewood for grain. Tomorrow, perhaps, you owe a day's labor in another's field. Villagers remember every deal. Forgetting is impossible when survival depends on trust and grudges alike. Historians still argue whether these webs of barter-bound villages closer or frayed them with resentment. You know the answer, both. Later, another neighbor arrives, this one empty-handed but pleading. His cow has fallen ill, and he offers to share milk if you will spare herbs for treatment. You hesitate. The herbs are few, saved for your own children's sickness, but his eyes are desperate, and you cannot turn away. You hand him a bundle of thyme and sage, muttering, "If the cow dies, you'll owe me more than milk." He nods solemnly, promising favors in spring. The Lord Steward visits next, striding into the village with a parchment list. Taxes are due, even in winter. He announces loudly that each household must provide grain or labor for the manor. Murmurs ripple through the villages, low and bitter. You glance at your spouse, who shakes her head, her lips pressed tight. You whisper sarcastically, "Perhaps the wolves will pay our taxes in mutton." No one laughs this time. The steward singles you out, his eyes narrowing. "You owe 2 days' labor when the thaw comes," he declares. You nod stiffly, though inside your stomach twists. 2 days away from your own fields may cost you dearly, but refusing is unthinkable. Nobles bargain with authority, not with fairness. Their debts are not optional. After he leaves, the villagers gather, grumbling. One man curses softly, saying he'll never pay. Another warns him to hush. Rebellion breeds punishment. You mutter, "Perhaps we should send the steward to trade with the wolves instead." This time, a few chuckle, though the laughter is brittle. At home, you talk with your spouse. She suggests trading some wool for more grain. You grimace. The wool is valuable, spun carefully over weeks. Yet hunger presses. Together, you decide to offer it at the next market. The children watch silently, their eyes darting between you. Even they understand these bargains are not choices, they are survival. Historians still argue whether peasants' barter systems were equitable or exploitative. In your life, the line blurs. Some neighbors are generous, others ruthless. Some trades save lives, others deepen debts that last for seasons. You recall one winter when a man borrowed grain and could not repay. By spring he had lost his freedom, bound as a servant to the Lord. That memory haunts every bargain you make. The next day, you carry a bundle of wool to a neighbor rumored to still have flour. He eyes it carefully, rubbing the fibers between his fingers. "It's coarse," he says, frowning. You bite your tongue to hold back anger. Coarse it may be, but it is warm, useful. Finally, he offers a small sack of flour in exchange. You accept, though you mutter under your breath, "May your bread taste as rough as your manners." At night, the children ask why you give away so much. You sigh, pulling them close, explaining gently, "Because winter is not a game of winning, it's a game of lasting. We trade today so we can see tomorrow." They nod, though your youngest frowns, muttering, "Tomorrow better bring stew." You laugh, kissing his head. Still, resentment simmers. Every time you hand over a log or a bundle of wool, you feel the sting. You imagine the nobles feasting above, debts meaningless in their stone halls, and your jaw tightens. You whisper sarcastically to your spouse, "Perhaps we should start charging the Lord interest." She chuckles, though the sound is weary. Yet there are small moments of grace. A widow down the lane brings you a candle, pressed from her own tallow. She says softly, "For your children's light." You offer her nothing in return, but she waves it off. "You gave me herbs when my son coughed," she reminds you. Debts flow both ways, sometimes tender, sometimes bitter. You tuck the candle into your chest with care. The weeks drag on, each day a balance of what to keep and what to surrender. Firewood dwindles, grain shrinks, wool unravels, but the children remain alive. The cow still moos in the corner, and each night you collapse into sleep knowing you have bought one more day. Historians still argue whether survival was truly communal or whether every household fought only for itself. Looking at your village, you see both truths at once. Some neighbors hoard, some share, some cheat, some sacrifice. It is a web of bargains, uneven, tangled, necessary. Before bed, you whisper to your children about debts and favors, weaving it into a story. Once there was a villager who traded bread for logs, logs for wool, wool for grain, until he had nothing left but laughter, and laughter, it turns out, fed him through winter. They giggle, rolling their eyes, but the lesson clings. You lie down on the straw pallet, your spouse's hand in yours, the children pressed close. Outside, the wolves howl, and somewhere above, the manor windows still glow. But here, in your smoky cottage, you have won another day through bargains, debts, and stubborn humor. You mutter softly, "Add that to the ledger, Winter. You'll not collect me yet." The snow begins to sag. At first it is subtle. The edges of the drifts slump, the icicles drip faintly, the frozen thatch of your roof glistens wet under the hesitant sun. After months of white silence, these small changes feel enormous. You step outside, and for the first time in weeks, the air carries the faint scent of earth beneath the cold. You bend down, brush away slush, and sniff the muddy ground. The smell is raw, damp, almost sour, but it is life returning, and your chest tightens with relief. The thaw is never gentle. Snowmelt gushes down lanes, pooling into mud so deep it clings to your boots like greedy hands. Children splash in it, laughing, their laughter echoing after so many weeks of silence. You shout half-heartedly, "Don't drown in the puddles," and they shriek with mock offense. Your spouse watches with a smile, though her eyes still linger on the thin sacks of grain inside. The thaw brings hope, yes, but not food, not yet. The livestock sense the change too. Your cow lows restlessly, tugging at her tether, eager for pasture. Chickens scratch near the doorway, testing the thawed ground. Even the birds return, black specks darting against the pale sky, their chirps startling in their cheerfulness. You grin, muttering sarcastically, "Finally, someone else to sing besides me." The children laugh, imitating the bird's calls until the cow joins in with a mournful moo. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly rejoiced at the thaw or dreaded it, since mud and flooding brought their own hardships. Standing ankle-deep in muck, you understand both feelings. You are grateful for the promise of green, yet weary of the mess. Your boots squelch, your cloak drags in filth, your hands blister from hauling buckets to redirect water from the cottage walls. Still, every drop that melts feels like winter surrendering. Neighbours emerge from their cotta, Jess blinking at the sunlight as though unused to brightness. One man kneels in the mud, scooping it in his hands, laughing like a fool. Another woman plants her broom in the ground and declares she will sweep until grass shows. You smirk, calling out, "Best sweep fast, before the mud eats you whole." She cackles, splashing a clod of muck in your direction. The market stirs again, livelier now. Villagers trudge with baskets, hoping for early greens, though the stalls remain meagre. You barter what little you have left, half a strip of wool for a handful of dried peas. The merchant shrugs, muttering that soon the new planting will begin. You nod, though your stomach growls at the thought of waiting weeks more for food. Spring's promise is fragile. One year, you remember, floods swept through fields, washing away seeds before they sprouted. Another year, frost returned suddenly, killing tender shoots. Historians still debate whether famine was caused more by weather or by mismanagement of grain. For you, both are true, but weather always feels like the hand of fate, too large to fight. You whisper a prayer as you plant the first handful of barley, your fingers cold in the wet soil. Your children join in, dropping beans into shallow holes, covering them clumsily. They giggle when worms wriggle up from the mud. "They're guardians of the garden," you declare, half serious. "Treat them well, or they'll eat all our bread." They squeal with delight, and for a moment, planting feels like play. At night, the mud seeps into your dreams. You imagine fields bursting green, stalks heavy with grain, baskets overflowing. But the dream twists. The fields flood, wolves stalk the shoots, nobles arrive to demand taxes before harvest. You wake with a start, sweat dampening your brow despite the chill. You sigh, muttering sarcastically, "Even my dreams charge rent." The thaw brings other changes too. The wolves grow quieter, retreating deeper into the woods as deer return. The howls that haunted your nights fade, replaced by the croak of frogs in puddles. Yet fear lingers. Your children still huddle at night, asking if the wolves will come back. You ruffle their hair, teasing, only if they've developed a taste for mud pies. They groan, laughing, the fear dissolving into giggles. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers marked the first thaw with rituals or celebrations. Some records mention processions, offerings to saints, even dances in the mud. In your village, the ritual is simpler. Neighbours gather to clear snow from the churchyard, shoveling it into piles, laughing when the heaps collapse. You join in, your back aching, but the laughter eases the pain. For once, work feels like relief, not burden. The cottage itself groans under the change. The thatch leaks where ice has melted, dripping onto the straw bed. You shift your family to drier corners, muttering, "Our free indoor fountain is finally working." Your spouse chuckles, though she shakes her head at the mess. You stuff rags into the gaps, promising to repair the roof once the ground dries enough to gather reeds. Your children run outside more often now, their cheeks flushed, their laughter louder. They chase one another with sticks, pretending to be knights again. One brandishes a muddy root like a sword, declaring himself champion of spring. You clap, bowing theatrically. Defeat the winter jeer. And for us, O mighty knight. He charges into a puddle, splashing mud everywhere, triumphant. At supper, the stew is still thin, but the onions taste fresher, the herbs more fragrant. You chew slowly, savouring not just the food, but the promise. You raise your wooden spoon in a mock toast. To mud, filthy, freezing, glorious mud. May it turn green soon. Your family laughs, clinking their spoons against yours. Historians still argue whether peasants truly marked the turning of the seasons as triumphs or simply endured them without ceremony. You know triumph when you feel it. Every drip of water, every squelch of mud, every bird's chirp is victory. Winter tried to kill you, and you are still here. As night falls, the snow outside collapses into slush, dripping steadily. You curl under the blankets, your children pressed close, your spouse's hand warm in yours. The sound of dripping is constant, but it is no longer threatening. It is the sound of winter dying. You whisper softly, half prayer, half joke. Farewell, old tyrant. May you choke on your own melting. Your children giggle sleepily, and you close your eyes, dreaming not of hunger, but of fields waiting to be green. The last snowdrifts shrink to ragged patches along the hedgerows, white islands in a sea of brown mud. When you rise one morning, you hear not silence, but the chirp of sparrows in the thatch above your cottage. Their voices are thin and fragile, yet they pierce the air like trumpets. You step outside and feel the sun on your face, weak still, but warmer than it has been for months. For the first time since autumn, you don't see only white and grey. The ground is streaked with green. Tiny shoots, brave and trembling, poke through the muck. You take a deep breath, the scent of damp soil heavy in your nose. It is not pleasant, but it is alive. Your children run barefoot through the slush, squealing as their toes sink into cold earth. You laugh, shaking your head. Enjoy it now. Soon that mud will be your workplace, not your playground. They giggle, chasing each other, their laughter ringing clear in the thawed air. Inside, the cottage feels different too. The smoke from the hearth does not choke you as much. The door, left ajar for fresh air, lets in the scent of wet grass. The cow lows softly, restless, eager for pasture. The chickens scratch near the doorway, bold enough to wander outside for the first time in months. You grin, sarcastically telling your spouse, "Our house guests are finally paying rent." She chuckles, wiping her hands on her apron. Historians still argue whether the relief of spring erased the memory of winter's hardships, or whether famine's scars lingered long after. For you, memory and relief exist together. You remember the howls of wolves, the taste of thin porridge, the rasp of coughs in the night. Yet the green shoots rising now seem louder than those memories, like voices shouting over them. Life, life, life. The village stirs with activity. Neighbours emerge, faces lean but smiling. One carries a ploughshare to be sharpened. Another leads a gall, untoxed to pasture. The priest rings the church bell, its sound clear and almost joyful. You join others in clearing fields, your boots sinking deep into muck. Each step is heavy, but each furrow turned feels like a promise planted in the soil. Children play while adults work, though sometimes the line blurs. Your eldest carries a basket of seeds, scattering them with exaggerated seriousness. Your youngest skips behind, pretending each seed is a knight on a mission. You smile at their imagination, remembering the long nights when only laughter kept despair away. Now their laughter is carried on the breeze, not trapped by smoky walls. One afternoon, you gather with neighbours to mend fences broken by snow. You work shoulder to shoulder, laughter mingling with the thud of hammers. Someone jokes that the wolves will be disappointed, locked out again. You quip, "They'll have to pay admission next time." And the group bursts into weary but genuine laughter. Sarcasm, once a defense, now feels like celebration. At the edge of the field, you pause, looking back at the village. Smoke curls gently from chimneys, not desperate but steady. Children's voices echo, dogs bark, a rooster crows proudly. For months you measured life in logs, in spoonfuls of grain, in coughs and howls. Now you measure it in songs, in green sprouts, in the light on your children's faces. Historians still debate whether medieval resilience was born from faith, from superstition, or from sheer stubbornness. You know it is all three. You clutched charms and prayed to saints. You cursed the cold with jokes. You made bargains and sacrifices. You endured hunger, sickness, fear. And now you stand on soil soft enough to plant again. That night, as you sit by the hearth, your children curl close, not for warmth but for comfort. You tell them stories of the winter just past, of wolves howling, of markets on frozen rivers, of charms and coughs and feasts by firelight. They laugh at your jokes, groan at your exaggerations, and beg for more. You realize, with a small start, that you are already turning hardship into memory, into story. And stories, like seeds, are what survive. Before bed, you step outside one last time. The moon glows silver above the thawing fields. You close your eyes, listening. No wolves, no storm. Only frogs croaking, water dripping, and the faint rustle of new leaves. You smile, whispering to the night, "We made it." The journey softens here, the rhythm slowing, the voice gentler. You lie back in the straw, the last coals of the fire glowing faintly, your family's breathing steady around you. The worst of the cold is behind you now, the howls of wolves, the taste of salted meat, the creak of frozen wells. All of it fades like echoes into the distance. What remains is the steady drip of thaw, the whisper of shoots pushing through soil, the slow but certain promise of spring. You close your eyes, and the images linger, neighbors laughing around a fire, children chanting rhymes to chase away shadows, hands tightening around mugs of weak ale. You remember the amulets hung by the door, the candles flickering bravely in the dark, the smell of stew rich with onions when food was found. All those fragments, fragile on their own, woven together, are into a fabric strong enough to hold a whole village through the winter. Your breathing slows, matching the gentle rhythm of the thaw outside. The snow melts quietly, streams forming soft lullabies as they slip through the fields. The air is cool but no longer sharp. It brushes your cheek like a soft hand instead of a knife. You picture green spreading across the land, slow and steady, each blade of grass a reminder that life does not end with winter, it only sleeps. Let the night carry you now. Let the memories of smoke and song, hunger and laughter wrap you like a blanket. The wolves are gone. The fires are steady. The village sleeps, and you sleep with it, safe and warm. And when morning comes, it will bring the light of spring,